A poor veteran returned from the war to live out his days on abandoned land that the bank was about to seize. Debts, loneliness, a past that wouldn't let go. But one night, a storm tore open the slope behind his house and revealed what had been hidden underground for decades. A secret cave from the Soviet era, forgotten tunnels, traces of people who had vanished without a trace, and a find that could either save his life or cost him everything. He didn't yet know that this step into the darkness would forever change his fate, and that some secrets of the Soviet Union do not forgive those who uncover them. A cold autumn morning slowly rose over the Ural hills, enveloping the old farm in damp fog and silence, in which the breath of bygone years could be heard. Thomas Reed stood at the threshold of his house, leaning on the doorframe, as if it were the last support keeping him from falling. He was a little over 50, but years of war and hard labor had made him older. His face was angular with sharp cheekbones, thick gray in his closely cropped hair, stubble always uneven as if he forgot about himself for several days at a time. His eyes were gray, faded but attentive, accustomed to looking danger in the face and not averting their gaze. This house he had known since childhood, log walls darkened by time, warped window frames, a roof that had long leaked after every rain. The house had survived collectivization, perestroika, the collapse of the Union, and now it seemed it wouldn't survive just one thing, the bank. The farm had come to Thomas from his grandfather, who had once returned from the front of the Great Patriotic War and built it with his own hands. Thomas's father, Robert Reed, worked in the mine during Soviet times, a tall, sturdy man with black mustaches and eternal coal dust under his nails. Rarely spoke about work but always repeated one thing: the land endures much but not betrayal. Now the land looked at Thomas wearily. The fields were exhausted, overgrown with weeds. The old cowshed stood without a roof, as if gnawed by a beast. The tractor, rusty and dead with burst tires, had long become a monument to a bygone life. Thomas had gone through the war, Afghanistan, then Chechnya. He returned unbroken but cracked inside. He had seen too much, buried comrades too often. After the war, he didn't seek the city, didn't want people. He returned here where the silence didn't shoot. He no longer had a family. His wife left early, unable to endure the night screams and silence. There were no children, only the land and memory remained. On the kitchen table lay a letter. Thomas knew it by heart but still reread it every day, as if hoping the letters would change. A bank notice, 14 days. In case of non-payment of the debt, the property is subject to seizure. The paper was thin, yellow, with a red seal the color of blood. Thomas didn't tear the letter. He believed that if he destroyed it, he would admit defeat, and he was still standing. He went out into the yard. The porch boards creaked under his steps. The fence was crooked, the gate held on by one nail. He used to fix everything, now he fixed by habit, not by hope. The neighbors hardly talked to him. To them he was strange, silent, gloomy, living in the past. In the village, they said the war had taken his soul. Thomas heard this and didn't argue. He didn't know if it was true, but he felt the emptiness inside. In the evenings, he often sat by the stove, staring into the fire. Sometimes he imagined mine tunnels that his father had told about, secret passages, closed zones, places not written about in newspapers. In the Soviet Union, much was hidden underground, and not just coal. This autumn, the weather was anxious. The air changed, the wind came from the mountains, sharp, damp, as if warning. Clouds gathered over the distant ridge, heavy, dark, as if carrying something more than rain. Thomas felt it with his body, just as before battles when the sky became too quiet. He walked to the edge of the field where the old ravine began. He avoided this place. The ground there was unstable, as if breathing. His father once said that in Soviet times, no one was allowed there, but never explained why. Thomas stopped, looking at the slope. The wind strengthened, leaves swirled in the air, finding no peace. In the distance, a crow cawed loudly, the sound sharp, ominous. He clenched his fists. 2 weeks, then people would come, take the land, the house, the memory. He would remain nobody. But for now he was still here, while the land was under his feet, while he could look at the sky and breathe this cold air. Thomas turned back to the house, not knowing that already that night the storm would change the outline of the slope, and that what had been hidden underground for decades from the Soviet times would soon rise to the surface. He didn't yet know that this forgotten land had not said its last word. Night came suddenly, as if someone had turned off the light over the Ural hills with one sharp movement. The wind struck first, a heavy, ragged gust from which the walls of the old house trembled. Then came the rain, thick and cold, lashing the roof as if the sky had decided to beat the last strength out of it. Thomas Reed didn't sleep. He sat on the bed, elbows on his knees, and listened as the house creaked and groaned like a living creature. He remembered such nights from the war when everything around froze before an assault, then exploded with noise. His heart beat evenly without panic. He had long grown accustomed to expecting the worst. Thunder struck somewhere very close. The windows trembled, and for a moment the room was flooded with white light. In that light, Thomas saw a crack on the ceiling, new, thin like a scar. The house was agging with him. Closer to midnight, the rain intensified. Water poured from the mountains, and Thomas heard a dull, drawn-out rumble coming from the ravine. The earth seemed to sigh, move, break. He got up, threw on a jacket, and went out to the porch. The wind hit his face, mixed with rain and the smell of wet foliage. In the darkness behind the house, shadows of trees bent under the gusts. Somewhere below there was a crack, as if giant bones were breaking. Thomas froze. This sound was new, ominous. By morning, the storm left as abruptly as it came. Only heavy, damp air and silence remained, in which the echo of the past night rang. Thomas left the house, stepping carefully on the sodden ground. The yard was disfigured. Branches lay everywhere. Part of the barn roof had collapsed completely. The fence on the northern boundary had fallen sideways. But Thomas's gaze was drawn not to the house. There beyond the field, where the ravine began, the slope had changed. The earth was as if torn from inside. A huge piece of soil had slid down, exposing a dark spot in the rock, uneven, gaping like a wound. Thomas approached closer. With each step he felt a strange tension, as if approaching not just destruction but something that shouldn't have been revealed. At the very foot of the slope he stopped. Before him was an opening, not a crack, not a beast's lair, two even edges, two regular shape. Cold pulled from there, thick, damp, with a sharp metallic tang. The air inside was still, heavy, as if stagnant for decades. Thomas stood silently, listening to his own breathing. War had taught him one thing: if something looks wrong, then it is. He bent down, peering into the darkness. The outside light didn't reach inside, as if someone was extinguishing it. And then he noticed the first thing. On a stone at the entrance lay a charred piece of wood, old, almost crumbling, but with clear traces of fire. A little further by the wall, a dark spot, ash mixed with clay, not fresh, very old. Thomas straightened up, feeling a chill crawl down his back. This wasn't nature's work. He remembered his father, Robert Reed, how he sat evenings at the table, smoking, staring at one point. Sometimes, when vodka made him talkative, he spoke of mines and closed places where entry was by pass and exit not always guaranteed. There were zones, son, he said quietly. There they didn't even write names, only numbers. Thomas was young then and didn't pay attention to these words. Now they surfaced in memory like a warning he had ignored too long. He took a step inside, just for a moment, to feel the ground. The stone under his boot was slippery, cold, unlike ordinary rock. The smell intensified, rust, dampness, something sour. Thomas immediately stepped back. No, not now, not like this. He returned home, but all day he walked as if in a fog, worked mechanically without looking, fixed what didn't need fixing. Thoughts kept returning to the dark mouth in the slope. Toward evening, he made a decision. From the attic, he took an old kerosene lantern, the glass sooty but intact. He found a coil of rope, stiff, frayed, but still strong. And finally, his father's old pickaxe, heavy. With a wooden handle polished by many years' palms, holding it felt strangely calm, as if his father stood beside him. To the ravine, Thomas walked slowly. The sun was setting, painting the earth in copper color. At the entrance to the opening, he stopped, inhaled, and lit the lantern. The flame flickered but held. He bent down and stepped inside. The passage was narrow, walls converging so close that shoulders almost touched the stone. Drops of water fell from the ceiling, hitting the floor dully. Every sound amplified, echoed, returned to him as alien. The lantern snatched details from the darkness, uneven walls, strangely even sections as if someone had smoothed them with tools, and again traces, black spots of soot, a board fragment with notches. On the wall, scratches, not chaotic but meaningful lines, signs. Thomas stopped, raising the lantern higher. This wasn't just a passage in the earth. This was a place where people had worked. The thought hit him with unexpected force. Under his land, something old, Soviet, hidden. He didn't go further. A soldier's instinct said, "Reconnaissance over, today we've had enough." When he came out, evening had already fallen on the farm. Thomas turned and looked at the black mouth in the slope. It seemed alive, patient, waiting. He knew he would return. And while the wind began to gather strength again over the mountains, Thomas Reed still didn't understand that he had taken the first step toward a secret that would change not only his fate, but everything he considered lost. Thomas returned to the mouth at dawn, when the fog still held low, clinging to stones and roots as if unwilling to let go of the night. He walked cautiously, as if entering not the earth but someone else's memory. The lantern shone steadily, the rope fastened to his belt, the pickaxe in hand, heavy and reliable like a promise. He bent down and stepped inside. The darkness accepted him immediately, without resistance, without sound. The air was denser than yesterday, damp with a metallic bitterness that scratched the throat. Thomas took a few steps and stopped, listening. Drops of water fell from the ceiling, measured like clock ticks. Here, time moved differently. Lantern illuminated the first find, 2 parallel iron strips, almost swallowed by clay and stone. Thomas knelt and ran his fingers over them, cold, rough rust eaten deep, but the shape unmistakable. Rails, not random scraps, not collapsed traces, real narrow-gauge rails leading deeper. He exhaled slowly. So here they didn't just walk, they transporting. Thomas rose and walked along them. As he advanced, the passage widened, walls became smoother, in places propped by rotted wooden beams. Touched one, wood crumbled under fingers, leaving dark dust. These supports were placed long ago, very long ago. A little further he saw a tool, a shovel with a broken handle, blade thinned from work. Nearby a pickaxe smaller than his own with a barely discernible stamp under layers of dirt. Thomas picked it up, examining. The metal was industrially processed, not homemade. On the wall nearby, inscriptions, not words but symbols, numbers, arrows, abbreviations in old technical Russian. Such he had seen in the army, in forgotten warehouses and bunkers where signs with instructions still hung, written for people who no longer existed. Higher, almost at the ceiling, a carved sign, hammer and sickle, worn but recognizable. Thomas froze, feeling a cold wave rise inside. "So it's true," he murmured, and his voice echoed back as if foreign. This wasn't just a workplace. This was a point on the map of that country that no longer existed, secret, closed, accustomed to hiding its treasures underground and under the stamp of top secret. He went further. The air grew heavier. The lantern burned steadily, but the light seemed to stick in the darkness, unwilling to go far. Thomas felt pressure, not physical but internal, as if walls compressed not around the body, but around thoughts. At some point it seemed he heard a sound, not drops, steps. He stopped, holding breath. Silence, then again quiet, uneven echo, as if someone walked ahead cautiously, trying not to make noise. Thomas gripped the pickaxe tighter. His heart beat evenly, but his chest felt tight. He knew this feeling, when the mind already understood you're alone, but the body didn't believe yet. Echo, he told himself quietly, just echo. But the sound repeated, a bit closer. Thomas stood motionless, counting heartbeats. Then the steps vanished, dissolved in drops and silence. He exhaled. Perhaps it was just a response to his own movements, or perhaps the memory of the place playing with the one who dared enter. The tunnel turned. Here the rails were half buried, as if someone tried to hide them. Thomas saw holes in the walls, places where metal hooks or cables once attached. In one corner lay a lantern of old design, glass broken, body dented. He picked it up, feeling strange kinship with the unknown worker who held this lantern decades ago. Further, the passage partially collapsed. Stones and earth blocked the way but left a narrow gap. Thomas crawled through, feeling his jacket catch on protrusions. On the other side, the space changed sharply. He was in a room, a small hall human height with uneven ceiling. The floor was littered with board and stone debris. In one corner, remnants of a mine cart, overturned and buried in earth. Iron wheels still held on the axle. Thomas slowly circled the room. Walls here were scored with tool marks. Someone worked furiously, as if in haste. In another corner, crates, or what remained of them. Boards rotted, but iron brackets still lay on the floor. This wasn't the end point. This was a shelter or storage, or something not evacuated in time. Thomas felt anxious excitement rise inside. He hadn't seen gold yet, hadn't found treasures, but understood. This place was built not for emptiness. The air here was especially heavy. The lantern began to smoke. Thomas realized it was time to return. He memorized everything, the turn, the collapse, the cart, the sign on the wall. His soldier's memory folded a map like on a mission. When he turned back, it seemed again that someone was behind him. He didn't turn immediately, only after a few steps, sharply raising the lantern. No one, just shadows that instantly changed shape, as if fleeing. He came out under the evening. The sun already leaned toward the mountains, coloring them reddish. Thomas stopped at the entrance, looking at the dark opening. Now he knew for sure, under his land, a Soviet tunnel, secret, abandoned, not fully explored. He extinguished the lantern and slowly walked home. His thoughts were heavy, but in them, for the first time in a long time, there was purpose. He didn't yet know what exactly the depths hid, but understood. Ahead was something greater, and this tunnel was just the beginning. Thomas returned to the tunnel the next day, when the sky was low and grey, as if it didn't want to look at the earth. He walked without haste, with that focused caution that comes to a man after many years of danger. The lantern shone evenly, rope secured at his waist, pickaxe in hand. His heart beat calmly, but inside, tension grew, like premonition. He passed along the familiar rails, by the rotted supports, and stopped at the mouth of the partially blocked passage that yesterday led him to the small room. Today he was ready to go further. Thomas squatted, listened. The silence was dense, almost viscous, no steps, no echo, only drops of water and his own breathing. He began clearing the collapse. Stones yielded reluctantly, earth crumbled, trying to return everything to place. Each pickaxe strike echoed in his hands with dull pain. Sweat streamed down his temples, mixing with the underground cold. But soon the blade hit something hard, not stone. The sound was different, muffled, metallic. Thomas froze, then carefully cleared the spot with hands. Under the clay layer appeared a corner, even, angular, clearly man-made. He worked slowly, almost tenderly, as if afraid to scare the find. After a few minutes it became clear. This was a chest, large, heavy, iron-bound. Edges riveted with golden rivets. Surface covered in rust and dried dirt. A trunk or safe. The lock was old, massive, with a tarnished seal. Thomas ran fingers over it, the metal cold, alive. Something tightened in his chest. He understood he stood on the boundary between past and present. He pried the lock with the pickaxe. Metal resisted, but years had done their work. With a quiet, painful screech, the lock gave way. Thomas flipped the lid. The lantern illuminated the contents, and the world seemed to shift. Inside lay gold bars, not bright, not shiny, matte, heavy, with stamps partially worn by time. Nearby, pouches with coins. Thomas poured a few into his palm, Soviet rubles, commemorative, some with the USSR coat of arms. Cold, dense, real. Under the gold lay folders, papers tied with twine. Thomas unrolled one. Documents were yellowed but legible, seals, signatures, secrecy stamps. He read slowly, peering at lines, and understood more and more. This was a reserve storage, an emergency repository of the state, created for crisis, war, collapse. Documents mentioned objects, codes, routes. What struck Thomas especially, part of the gold wasn't listed in any official register. It was surplus, unregistered, hidden. So not everything arrived, he whispered. Thomas dropped to his knees. The weight of realization was heavier than any bar. This would be enough to save the farm, pay the debt, restore the house, perhaps start a new life. But with it came another understanding. This was dangerous. Gold doesn't tolerate loneliness, it always calls. Thomas closed the chest. He didn't take it out. Instead, he carefully covered the trunk with the tarpaulin he brought and masked it with stones and earth, so the place looked like an ordinary collapse. He took only the documents, folded them into a tight bag, pressed to his chest. When he came out, the day was already leaning toward evening. The sun barely broke through clouds. Thomas walked home quickly, constantly looking back. It seemed the earth itself watched him. In the village, he noticed the first changes, glances. Before they looked through him, now they lingered. The old man at the store squinted when Thomas passed. A middle-aged woman, Anna Thompson, plump, with short-cropped light hair and always distrustful expression, stopped talking as soon as she saw him. She was one of those who knew everything and everyone and could piece rumors faster than facts. Thomas felt it on his skin. Something had changed, though he had told no one. In the evening, he hid the documents under a floorboard in the house, where his father once kept money for a rainy day. The wood yielded easily, the spot seemed to wait its hour. Thomas sat at the table looking at an empty mug. His hands trembled, not from fear, from tension. That night he couldn't sleep. Outside the window, wind rustled. Every sound seemed a step. He got up, went to the window, and saw in the distance, at the field edge, a shadow flicker. It vanished, as if dissolved. Thomas stared there long, not moving. He understood. The secret no longer belonged only to him. Autumn deepened, and with it thickened unease. Thomas Reed felt it as old soldiers feel weather changes, not with eyes but with skin. The farm was no longer quiet. The silence became alert, like a pause before a shot. Rumors spread quickly, first whispers at the store, then open glances. They said strangers were seen near the fields. An unfamiliar car drove to the ravine. At night someone stood long at the forest edge, as if counting steps to Thomas's house. He tried not to show anxiety, walked as usual, fixed the fence, carried water, chopped wood. But at night he slept lightly, Any sound, branch crack, board creak, raised him from bed. The first visit happened in the daytime. 3 men arrived at the farm in an old SUV. They looked different but shared one thing, confidence with which they held on foreign land. The eldest was tall, lean, with a long face and graying temples, dressed simply but cleanly. He spoke calmly, almost politely. "We are descendants of miners," he said, introducing himself as Alexander Mitchell. "Our grandfathers worked here back in the Union. They say you found something in the ground." Thomas looked at him silently. Alexander Mitchell didn't avert his gaze, eyes grey, cold, accustomed to assessing. The second, stocky, with heavy jaw and short beard, said nothing. His name was George, and he kept looking around as if memorizing every yard detail. The third was younger, nervous, with narrow shoulders and darting eyes. He kept hands in pockets and constantly shifted foot to foot. "There's nothing here," Thomas finally said. "Ordinary land." Alexander Mitchell smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Land is rarely ordinary," he replied, "especially this one." They left without threats, without noise, but their presence left a feeling as if someone ran a finger over an open wound. 2 days later, another man appeared in the village. He didn't hide, didn't ask openly, just sat in the store corner, drank tea and watched. His name was William Irving, short, stocky, with neatly trimmed grey beard and attentive dark eyes. Dressed strictly, dark coat, leather gloves. Spoke little, but each word measured. Thomas recognized him almost immediately. He had seen such people before, in war, at bases, in places where no randoms are. Former KGB officer, it read in posture, how he held his back, how attentively he listened even when seeming not to. William Irving approached Thomas himself. "They say you have interesting land," he said quietly. "Its history is complex like the whole country's." "History," Thomas replied. The man nodded, as if confirming long-known truth. "If you need advice." Tilted his head slightly. "I'm here not for long." He left, leaving a cold sense of observation. Thomas understood. The circle was tightening. That same night, someone had been in the house. Thomas knew it immediately by the shifted stool, by the drawer closed differently than he left it. Nothing missing, but the floorboard under which documents lay was barely noticeably shifted. He sat at the table, feeling quiet, dangerous anger rise inside. They knew or guessed, and this was only the beginning. In the morning, Thomas gathered and drove to the city. The road took several hours. The city met him with noise and indifference. Here he felt alien but knew why he came. The lawyer he was directed to was a man in his 60s with thick brows and tired face. Oliver Patton, as he introduced, spoke calmly without extra emotions. He studied documents attentively, flipping pages slowly, as if weighing each line. "The papers are genuine," he finally said, "and quite serious." Thomas sat opposite, clenching hands, heart beat faster. "This is a reserve object," Oliver Patton continued. "By law, you have the right to claim it as part of the land in your ownership. The procedure will be long and not safe." "I'm used to it," Thomas replied shortly. The lawyer looked at him attentively, as if seeing him truly for the first time. "Then we need to act quickly and carefully." When Thomas returned to the farm, evening was thickening. He noticed fresh tracks at the ravine, not his. Someone had descended there recently. Heart clenched, he quickened step. At home, a surprise waited on the porch, a note short, unsigned. "Not all gold belongs to those who find it." Thomas crumpled the paper and threw it into the stove. Flame quickly ate the words, but the meaning remained. Danger no longer hid, it came into the light. Night fell on the farm without warning. No wind, no rain, just heavy, dense silence that rang in the ears. Thomas Reed didn't sleep. He sat at the table without lighting, listening to every rustle outside the house walls. After the note burned in the stove, he knew the next move would be not words. A little after midnight, he heard an engine sound, muffled, cautious. The car stopped not at the house but further at the field edge. Thomas rose slowly, as if each sharp movement could betray him. He threw on a jacket, took the lantern, checked pocket. The phone was there. Signal caught poorly here, but sometimes enough. Didn't go to the ravine immediately. Instead, he circled the house, moving along shadows. And then he saw light, not bright, flickering, reddish, a torch or old lantern. Someone was already descending to the mouth. Thomas exhaled through teeth. They decided not to wait. He knew this moment before battle, when everything inside compresses but mind becomes clear. He moved after, noiselessly, saving movement. At the tunnel entrance, he stopped and listened. Voices, muffled, tense. "Here," someone said. "Faster," another replied. Thomas entered the tunnel last. Darkness closed around him, but he felt the space as soldiers feel in night patrol. He walked along the wall, lantern off, orienting by weak light ahead. There were 4 of them. He recognized 2 immediately. George, stocky with heavy build, moved confidently, as if used to physical work. Next to him, Alexander Mitchell, tall, dry, with the same calm posture as before, but now his movements held rigidity. With them were two more men around 35 to 40, faces sharp, eyes restless. One held a metal crowbar. They had already reached the blocked passage. George struck the crowbar on stones, clearing the way. Each blow echoed in the tunnel like heartbeats. Thomas stepped forward. "You won't go further," he said loudly. Voices cut off. Lanterns turned toward him. Light hit eyes, but Thomas didn't avert gaze. He stood straight, legs apart, shoulders squared. In this moment, he was not a farmer. He was who he once was. "This is my land," he continued, "and what's under it too." Alexander Mitchell squinted. "The land, yes, but what's under it?" He smirked. "That's still a question." George stepped forward, gripping the crowbar. Thomas noticed how his shoulders tensed, how center of gravity shifted. He knew this body language, knew when a man is ready to strike. "Without documents, no one has anything," Thomas said calmly. "Not you, not me, not those who were here before us." One of the new men smirked. "You think papers will stop us?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. He took a step closer, and lantern light caught his face, angular, hard, with frozen resolve in eyes. "No," he said, "but they will stop those who come after you." Tension thickened. Air became heavy, as if cuttable with a knife. George lunged first. Thomas was quicker. He stepped aside, intercepted the crowbar arm, and sharply struck elbow into torso. The blow was precise, measured, not to break, but to stop. George cursed and staggered back. The second man rushed forward, but Thomas was ready. He knocked him off feet using inertia and pinned to the wall. Alexander Mitchell didn't interfere, he watched. In his gaze flashed something new, not anger but calculation. "Enough," he said sharply. Thomas froze, breathing heavily. No one seriously hurt, but all understood. These weren't empty words. "You won this round," Alexander Mitchell said, "but not the war." "I'm not planning to war," Thomas replied. "I'm planning to defend mine." At that moment, Thomas heard a distant sound, siren, weak but distinct. He had pressed the phone button before entering the tunnel. Signal went through. The men's faces changed. George cursed again, angrier. One of the new ones glanced to the exit. "Time," Alexander Mitchell said quietly. They retreated, not hastily but quickly. Lanterns went out one by one, and soon in the tunnel remained only Thomas and silence. When he came out at the ravine, already stood a local administration car. Headlights cut the darkness. Out stepped the precinct officer, a short, thin man with tired face and worn uniform. He looked at Thomas, then at tracks by the entrance. "Trouble again?" he asked. "They came themselves," Thomas replied. "Next time will be worse," the officer nodded. He asked no extra questions. He had seen enough. When it all ended, Thomas remained alone. He stood at the tunnel mouth, gazing into darkness, and felt tension slowly leave inside. But in its place remained another heaviness, understanding. They wouldn't retreat forever. He turned and walked home, knowing the next battle would be not here in darkness but in light, and it would decide everything. Winter came early but without malice. Snow lay even, quiet blanket, as if wanting to hide traces of past troubles and give the earth respite. Morning was bright, frosty, and air rang so cleanly that each breath seemed a new beginning. Thomas Reed stood at the window and watched first sun rays touch the fields. Now they no longer seemed dead. The land was still tired, but in it appeared life, expectation, readiness to accept labor again and return fruits. The decision came officially and dryly, as all born in offices. Documents signed, seals placed. Right to develop subsoil under the farm recognized legal, not only his personal right but duty, under state supervision with rules, reports, inspections. Thomas read papers attentively, not rushing, as if each line needed passing through himself. He didn't smile. Joy came not immediately, first emptiness, as if long-compressed spring finally uncoiled, then warm, quiet sense of confidence. He had withstood. The project launched in spring. To the farm came people, engineers, geologists, workers. Among them was Andrew Lawson, tall man in his 40s with open face and calm gaze. He spoke confidently, without extra words, accustomed to answering for decisions. Andrew became work leader. He respected land and people living on it and immediately made clear, "There won't be chaos or greed here," he said to Thomas first day. "We don't rob," Thomas nodded. These words were close to him. The road to the ravine came alive. Where shadows once walked, now stood equipment. Evening spotlights illuminated the slope, and the tunnel entrance no longer looked like a wound. It became gates to past and future at once. The farm changed gradually. Thomas paid off debts calmly, without triumph. The bank paper, once a sentence, now lay in the stove, turning to ash. House repaired, roof stopped leaking, walls strengthened, windows replaced. barn rebuilt anew, and soon animals appeared there again. In the village too began changes. People who before looked warily now greeted. Youth got jobs, elders had reason to leave homes and talk. Anna Thompson, all the same attentive and distrustful, now smiled more often, though by habit still shielded, as if checking if this well-being wouldn't vanish as suddenly as it appeared. Thomas held simply. He didn't move to city, didn't trade house for new. In mornings, still went out to yard, listened to silence, looked at sky. Sometimes helped workers, not because needed, but because he felt connection to place. Evenings, he often descended to the ravine when work ended, stood at tunnel entrance, remembered that first step into darkness. Now there it was light, safe, but he knew darkness taught him to see. Past didn't go, it remained in stone, old rails, worn hammer and sickle sign. But now this past didn't press, it became part of history, tellable honestly, without fear. Once William Irving approached him, that same former officer. He had aged these months, or just allowed looking older. Beard a bit longer, gaze softer. You made the right choice, he said. Not everyone could. I just stayed myself, Thomas replied. William Irving nodded and left, no longer turning. His role ended as roles end for people used to standing in shadow. People who came for gold vanished. Some understood game lost, some found other prey. Cold envy once hovering in air dissipated, remained work hard but honest. In summer, fields greened again. Thomas stood amid them, feeling under feet land that finally ceased being burden. He didn't become rich in usual sense, didn't buy expensive cars, didn't leave abroad. Money for him not goal but tool to preserve what was important. Sometimes evenings he sat on porch and watched sun go behind hills. In such moments it seemed his father stood nearby, not as ghost but as memory, calm, approving. Thomas knew, if he saw what became of farm, he would just silently nod. That would be enough. The tunnel became symbol, not of treasures but of choice. Choice to go to end, not break, not sell self for metal shine. Thomas understood this finally when once a boy from village approached and asked, "Uncle Tom, is it true you found treasure?" Thomas smiled, first time in long while, easily. "I found land," he replied, "and myself on it." When autumn came, he again went out morning to porch. Cold air same as year ago, but inside all different. He no longer man about to lose everything. He became one who keeps memory and builds future. Light on old land, not bright, not blinding, it even reliable, like light passed through darkness. Miracle not always looks like gold or sudden salvation. Sometimes God gives it through trial to test who we remain when all can be lost. When seems no way out, the Lord often opens door we didn't notice before. Important only not harden heart and not lose faith. May God protect each who watches this video and give strength to pass their path. If this story touched you, share it, write in comments where you watch from, and if you believe in miracles, and subscribe to channel not to miss new inspiring stories. God bless you.